Hey, Sonograver here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to a retro review. A review of a retro game. We're going to be talking about Secret of Mana and how I very much want to love this game. This is going to be an honest review and I hope it either persuades you to check it out, see what you like, depending on what you like in a game, or maybe it might dissuade you from playing it. I don't know. So hopefully you think this is some good input. So without further ado, I'll just go ahead and give you the score. I give it a 2 out of 5. I really want to give it a 2.5 or a 3 out of 5. And I feel like the good is very good, but man, the bad is very, very bad. So let's talk about what makes the game great, and then we'll talk about what makes the game pretty hard to play. The first thing is, I would say, graphics. It's a very beautiful world, and the graphics really do hold up. This game, made in 1993 or before that, and then released in 1993, beautiful. I mean, it's really aged well. You know, it's 30 years old, and so I would say it's really held up in terms of beautiful high fantasy world building. We've got woods, beautiful woods. We've got desert and ice, and you can even have a flying dragon to course you over the ocean and have you traverse through over lands and seas and all of that good stuff. And so I would say, yeah, graphics are great. The sprite design is very, very good for 1993 especially. The main playable characters, you've got Randy. He's got a great design. Prim is a very lovely girl. And then Papoy the sprite. The sprite of the sprite is also well designed. And Papoy is a boy. You can contend with me on that. I don't care. I'm just going to say right out of the gate, he's a boy. He's not an it. He's not a her. He's not a she. He's a boy. So anyway, good sprite design. Even the non-playable characters, especially the young women, they're very beautiful to look at. The men, they've got the very nice stern features as well. Even the comical looking characters are great as well. So all in all, I would say the design is very good. The graphics are very good. I would knock it a point for the text. I think there's a little bit of dithering with the text against like this kind of gated, meshed, threaded look. And I would say it is kind of hard to read the text, but other than that, it's very good. The villains, I would say the main villains are pretty good as far as design, but the main monsters that you fight, yeah, I'd give it, a 50% or maybe 60%. There are some monsters that are really too cute to slaughter, but you do have to slaughter them. And then there are other main monsters that are very cartoonish. Some look great, some of the dragons look great, but then some are just, the Japanese have a way of just making very, very strange looking creatures that seem out of Alice in Wonderland. But, if you can overcome the cuteness or the cartoony look, then I would say give this game a try if you like old retro graphics that really do hold up. The second is music. I would say the soundtracks by Kikuta, I think is his name. I would give it a good solid B, maybe a B plus. I will say it's a hit or miss. His good tracks are really, really good. And then there are some tracks I'm like, there was a deadline because I would say the second to the final boss, it's pretty bad. Worst boss fight I had ever heard. But the main boss, the final boss fight, great score, wonderful score. A lot of good music. For the capacity, it had with that hardware of the time, I would say Kikuta is very, very on point as far as music composition, as far as complexity, as far as instrumentation. A lot of good, very beautiful stuff, very mysterious stuff. Things can run on loop and you don't get tired of it. You don't go into a battle music and then you don't branch away or you don't go away into the world music. It's very fluid between, fighting because it's action RPG rather than turn-based RPG. And very nice music. There's one point where there's kind of this jazz fusion that just doesn't take you out. It's a very interesting piece of music where I think the meter is 16/8, which makes it feel a little asymmetric, but wonderful. I would say because of the capacity and the limitations of the hardware, there are some times where in the middle of a tense battle, you're fighting and you've got your weapon sounds, and then you've got the sounds of the enemies you're engaging with, and the music on top of that. There are a lot of points where the instruments just drop off, and sometimes the music drops off altogether. So there are glitches, at least in my experience, there were glitches with the soundtrack. But that's not the composer's fault. That's just part of the limitations of the time. So I'd give the score just, I'd love to do an in-depth analysis, separate, make a separate video of that. So I will give the score for Secret of Mana probably a B or B plus. But I do recommend a lot of those tracks. They're very, very, very well done. And then I think the final thing, the final good thing that really wins the trophy, the first place, really gets that A+++ is the fighting mechanics. Now I know some people I've listened to reviews, people say the fighting is a little rough around the edges. And I could probably see why. There were some things I had to work through mechanically, but the fighting style, this action RPG, is really great when you toggle between enemies. They've got this really good system. They developed a really good system where when you strike a character or swipe at a character or an enemy, I should say, when the good guys take a swing and throw a punch at the bad guys, you instantly lose stamina. And so you have to take a little bit of time to have that stamina be, replenished. And so while you're gaining strength or you're recharging, you're going to go to another character who takes a strike, strikes at the enemy, and then they're going to rest, and then you're going to toggle to another character. And so it's this, you get to this kind of zone, this kind of fluid zone where it's really cathartic and getting monsters, especially when you really level up, getting monsters and feeling the hit and hearing the whack and then seeing these giant red numbers, the damage score that you achieved is very satisfying. The fighting mechanics is pretty much the best part of the game. It's actually the reason why I really want to like this game for all its flaws, because it's really, really fun. But really, those are the three things that are the good aspects of the game. You've got great graphics, you've got a great soundtrack, and then you've got phenomenal fighting skills, fighting mechanics between stamina, raising stamina, and toggling, fluidly toggling between the three playable characters. Now, what causes the score to be a 2-star, 2 out of 5 stars, is two main big problems. The first problem is this game is highly counterintuitive. It's not an easy game to follow. You might get stuck really in the first stage, even before the major things happen, even before you take up the sword as Randy, the main protagonist. It is highly difficult. It takes time to find your way around. Sometimes you have this little opening to get through, or sometimes if you didn't know, like if you didn't have an old school manual, you're like, okay, I can't go through this. And then maybe there'll be little cues, but it really starts with just little cues, like 1 or 2 cues, and then basically you're on your own. After you defeat the first monster, you're on your own, and you have to kind of find your way through the areas to get to the places. Now, the instructions are very non-intuitive. So maybe a soldier will say, well, you need to take up this sword and power this sword, get the power, the mana power to be imbued in this sword. You become the knight. You're going to be the hero. So you have to up the sword. The sword is useless until you go to a certain place. And so I'm like, okay, that's my first mission, is to get this sword powerful. Now, I will say right off the bat, you're not going to get the ultimate sword until the final battle with the final boss. I thought you were going to get a powerful sword and then carry on your journey. The premise is you take up the sword and then all of a sudden monsters are everywhere. And Randy is outcast. He becomes an outcast from his village because they blame him for causing so much disturbance with monsters. I'm like, okay, I took up the sword. I need to go slay monsters now. Pretty basic, right? And then one soldier general says, oh no, you need to find the way to make this sword more powerful so you can use it to slay all the monsters. I'm like, okay, that's cool too. Go to this place. And like, okay, I'm going to go to this place. And then I run into a girl, Prim, and she needs help with something. And I'm going to be the hero to say, okay, well, I have to help you. Yeah, I can't choose to go off my own. And I've got to go to this place, this area. She's like, no, we got to go to this place and find my beloved and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, well, you're the hero. You got to help this girl out. And then the original mission to get this sword all uber powerful kind of goes away for a long time. And then you and the girl come upon this sprite, and he has no recollection of who he is or what he's about until maybe 2 areas down. And then he finds his purpose, and he has to save humanity. And then okay, we're supposed to slay the monsters. We're supposed to get this sword powerful. And then down the road, like 10 hours into the gameplay, your world is of an empire. Like, what empire? And then you actually, before that, you encounter a sorcerer who wants to, take a body. We find out later, like the pure noble version of a body, so he can rule the world and all that. So you've got this sorcerer guy that you have to contend with, and then you realize, oh, he's like he's part of the empire. Like, he serves the emperor, who is an absolute NPC, and I mean that in the most disparaging way. The empire all around, and the resistance all around. Like, there was a resistance to the empire. We never joined the resistance, which is probably for the better. We just slay monsters. We just help them out, get through stuff. But we're really on our own. The 3 playable characters, we're just trying to fight monsters and find the next thing. We're told to go somewhere. Like, that's your mission, is like, oh, we're supposed to go somewhere. Okay, we're going to go there. And then they tell us to go somewhere else. And we try to find, and it's very hard to find these areas, by the way. Especially if you don't have Flammy, the wonderful dragon creature. It's very hard to maneuver and find your way around these areas. And at least for me, I found myself going around circles, circles after circles, just trying to get to the area I need to get to. So you do a lot of gameplay, you do a lot of battles, and you do a lot of exploration before the next big thing of the story. And then when the next big thing of the story happens, you forget what happens previously in the story because there's so much gameplay in between stories. Now, getting more into the counter, having it be counterintuitive is the magic of it. So basically, Papoy, the sprite, and Prim, the girl, are granted the ability to cast magic. And they each get, besides at one point where Prim gets white knight power or holy power or whatever it is, the light side power, Papoy gets the dark side power. Besides those two, that distinction, they pretty much have all these sprites the same. The water sprite, the lightning sprite, or demigod, whatever you would call it. The fire demigod, whatever. The presence of, the elemental presence of these different things. Okay, that's fine. And you do need the fire magic caster a lot. You need the lightning magic caster a lot. And so that's cool. So, and actually, your weapons level up. So if you stick with the same weapon level, it's going to be pretty powerful at the end of the game. Likewise, if you use a lot of magic like fire, for instance, your fire is going to be leveled up. Well, that's all well and good, especially if you're like, oh yeah, fire seems to work everywhere. Fire seems to create the most damage. That's cool. I'm going to use fire all the time. So you're going to be leveled up very, very well there because you use it so frequently. Well, that's all fine and dandy until at one point in the Mana Fortress, which is the final stage, that I didn't know it was the final stage, but yeah, felt like the final stage by that time. There's this one boss. You fight 2 bosses until you get to the sorcerer in his true form, his true nature, and then you fight the ultimate mana beast at the end. But you get to 2 bosses before the sorcerer. The second boss got my mind just swamped because I had to, basically, to defeat this boss, I had to pretty much spam dark magic on this boss. Well, that was not a cool thing because I did not level up my dark magic. I was at level 0, and I really had to be level 5 to defeat this one boss. That's very counterintuitive. I'm like, oh, I don't need this dark magic until I need it, but I need to grind and get this specific magic up It was the same way with one of Prim's elemental magic. I was like, oh, and then one other creature, like demigod, I think she was like a nymph of some sort. She says when she is revived by the mana seed, she says to the party, "Oh, my powers are not of use to you." I'm like, okay, so she doesn't have a lot of power. I'm not going to use her. And then you come to find out you actually really, really do need to use this magic. And so I found myself like in hour 30 or 40 just only grinding and spamming a particular magic for hours. Like it would take a week just to get one magic element up. And so I was like, no, you should have told me that you are very useful, lady tree creature, because I needed you, actually. And so the magic system was really, it was very off. Like you could spam fire magic for a water creature, but then if someone was vulnerable to dark magic and you didn't have your dark magic leveled up, then you spent another 5 hours just spamming dark magic on everything you encountered until you can beat that boss. The Mana Fortress at the end took me forever just because I had to grind and get my magic levels up. I wish I knew that previously so I could like pace myself with different magic. With fire magic, it was a given that you would use it a lot. Lightning, same thing. But something like light magic or dark magic or reviving magic, it just was not a given. No one told me what like that should be the thing you do. So very counterintuitive. It was no. I would just want to spam attack everyone and not even bother with magic. So that was the major thing that tanked the score, is the whole game being very counterintuitive. I will say before moving on to the story, when you start the ring menu that you work with Randy at first, and then toggling between Randy, Prim, and Papoy. When you first do it, just take time, maybe go on the internet, because it took me several minutes getting used to, okay, how do I find this? How do I find this? And then, oh, I can go to this menu and this menu and this menu. But it took me a good half hour just to kind of work it and see it. So if you have an old school manual or the internet, that's great, but you're probably going to use the internet a lot if playing Secret of Mana is going to be the first try. I feel like I'll enjoy the game on a second play, but it's not a replayable game. So let's go ahead and talk about the story. So the story was a huge problem. It was a very huge problem for me, but it was a greater problem for Professor Geek. He would work and stuff while I was playing, but he did not like the game. He did not like Secret of Mana for reasons, of course, as we know him to be. He's a person of storytelling, whether he writes his own stories or talks about a lot of good stories. And Secret of Mana, if you're looking for a good story, I'm sorry, you're not going to find it with Secret of Mana. People say, oh, it's a good story. It's like, no, it's not a good story, for a couple of reasons. Basically, I'll give it this. If I was a master editor and people said, oh, what would you do to make the story of the Secret of Mana better? Actually, I would just probably leave out the story entirely. The premise was Randy picks up the sword. He's chosen. For some reason, we'll see until, we won't see until the very end. He's chosen to pick up the sword, and then monsters are all over the place, and he has to take care of them. That's basically the premise, and that would have been perfect just as a story. He's got monsters to take care of. He's got the world to save. That's it. That would have been a beautifully simple objective, and I would have been just fine with that. Because why? I loved the fighting mechanics so much. It didn't need any other plot. It did not need another story. The bad guys were really just in the way. The sorcerer, he didn't really make sense because I'm like, oh, he's the main antagonist. And then we come to find out, no, he serves the emperor, who is absolutely inconsequential. His whole empire is inconsequential. The resistance to the empire is inconsequential. It's like, this could have just been a high fantasy game without the empire, without the sorcerer. Maybe have the sorcerer because he's dark. He uses dark magic. He's evil. But you didn't even need him. Thanatos is his name. you didn't need him for a great game. And then we get into, oh, who is Randy's mother? And Papoy will say something offhanded about Prim not having a mother when Randy's mother, as a spirit passes away. Well, Prim doesn't have a mother. Why should you be sorry that your mother leaves or something? Don't go, mother. Don't go. I need to talk to you. I never knew you. And then Papoy's like, but Prim never had a mother either. Like, I didn't know that. Like, we know Prim has a father. We know there's like Prim is, forced to marry someone that she doesn't want to marry because she's in love with another boy. And we don't really see the romance blossom between her and the boy she's looking for. Papoy has a grandfather, a sprite, and then we understand the risk of Papoy saving humanity because he will disappear. That works, but by the time you get to these little points of the plot, you forget. You forget because there's so much gameplay in between. It's like, oh yeah, him. Oh yeah, this town. And so they really should have left the Empire out completely, and maybe Thanatos as well. Maybe Thanatos could stay, but then there were bullies. There were just antagonists that were just bullies, like hired hands of the Empire. I was like, who are you? I don't need to fight you. Like, what purpose do you serve the story? So there was that. It was highly, highly convoluted. And then, by the end, there's Papoy disappears, and then the credits start rolling. And then I remember Professor Geek, my fiance, being so mad that there was no satisfying ending. And yeah, the story is very, very unsatisfying. I would say that I had heard that there was, I think I read a review, like an article, where there was a point in the deadline in the creation of this game where they axed 2/3 of the story. I was like, you should have axed all of it and just had a simple adventure, and that was it. So the story suffers, and it's highly, highly counterintuitive as a game. So just be prepared if this is your first time going into Secret of Mana. Enjoy the world building, enjoy the fighting mechanics, enjoy the music, enjoy the graphics, but that's pretty much it. You're going to find yourself going to the internet and seeing some gameplays, seeing some walkthroughs. And if that's your cup of tea, then that's great. But that is my honest review of Secret of Mana. Some good stuff, but the bad really did outweigh the good. So if I ever play it again, it'd be years down the road when I'm sick and I don't feel like exploring a new game and I don't want to play any other game that I've played. But I have hope that maybe one day there'll be a masterful remake of the game, because I really was rooting for the characters. For the little I had been given, I was rooting for the characters. So maybe in the future, these 3 characters will really have a very interesting story. But I'm not the developer to do that. So developers, if you're watching, if you have the rights to do that, go ahead and do that. Make me happy, because I would really like to see a masterful version of this game. Anyway, I will stop there. Thank you so much always for watching and listening. And until I see you next, keep producing the good art you love and play those good games. And I'll catch you later. Thanks.